Welcome to 2025, where the world's most unlikely sequel is back. Presidential Trade Wars, starring Canada as the new target. This time the drama is bigger, the stakes are higher, and the consequences are rippling far beyond the headlines. What started as a campaign promise has now become a full-blown international crisis, with the world's friendliest border suddenly at the center of a global economic storm. After a landslide return to the White House, President Trump celebrated by slapping a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods and 10% on energy exports, ostensibly to fight fentanyl. But really, it's economic chaos disguised as policy. The move sent shockwaves through boardrooms and kitchen tables alike, as families and businesses scrambled to make sense of the new reality. By July, tariffs soared to 35% on most goods, 50% on steel and aluminum, and 25% on cars and auto parts. The escalation was relentless, with new categories added almost weekly, leaving industries with little time to adapt or plan ahead. It's less a trade policy, more a list of things Trump saw and decided to tax: cars, steel, copper. If it moves, it's taxed. The randomness of the approach left economists scratching their heads and businesses fearing what might be next. The US-Canada relationship, once the world's model of stability, is now in a tailspin. Decades of trust and cooperation are being tested like never before, as both sides struggle to find common ground. For decades, the border symbolized peace and prosperity. Now, it's the front line of a trade war built on shaky logic. The once busy crossings are now scenes of tension, with truckers and travelers caught in the crossfire. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government is left scrambling, trying to respond to a partner seemingly intent on burning down the house they've shared for a century. Emergency meetings and late-night strategy sessions have become the new normal in Ottawa. Canada's response? Strategic, quiet, and surprisingly effective. Instead of matching fire with fire, Carney's team is working behind the scenes, building alliances and seeking new markets to soften the blow. The tariffs have thrown supply chains into disarray, with businesses on both sides of the border reeling. Shelves are emptier, prices are higher, and uncertainty is the only thing in steady supply. American companies are feeling the pain too, as costs rise and uncertainty spreads. Small towns and big cities alike are seeing layoffs, closures, and a growing sense of unease about the future. The world watches as two of the closest allies descend into economic conflict over a crisis that barely exists. International leaders are baffled, and global markets are jittery, unsure of what the next tweet or press conference might bring. The Canadian government, caught between outrage and pragmatism, is forced to rethink its entire economic strategy. Long-term plans are being rewritten and new partnerships are being explored as Canada looks to weather the storm. The US seems determined to win a game no one else wants to play. The aggressive stance is isolating Washington, even as it tries to project strength on the world stage. Canada, meanwhile, is preparing for a long, strategic battle, one that could reshape North American trade for a generation. The country is quietly forging new alliances and investing in resilience, determined not to be caught off guard again. The stakes? Hundreds of billions in trade, millions of jobs, and the future of the world's longest undefended border. The outcome will shape not just economies but the very fabric of life for millions of people. As the dust settles, one thing is clear: this is no ordinary trade dispute. It's a test of resilience, diplomacy, and the ability of two nations to find common ground in a world that feels increasingly divided. It's a diplomatic and economic earthquake, and the aftershocks are just beginning. The world is watching, and the next moves will define the future of North America for years to come. Why the sudden hostility toward Canada? The White House claims it's about stopping fentanyl, but that's a smokescreen. The real reason: Trump's obsession with trade deficits. Canada's $63 billion surplus is the scoreboard he can't ignore. The administration's global tariff spree, hitting 23 countries with up to 50% duties, creates cover for targeting Canada. It's not about drugs, it's about making foreign goods expensive until America wins. This isn't diplomacy, it's economic bullying dressed up as tough talk. The logic? If everyone's mad, no one can say you're picking on Canada. But for Canadians, it's personal and costly. The US is treating trade like a zero-sum game, and Canada is the first casualty. The result? A manufactured crisis with real-world consequences for millions. Let's unpack the fentanyl claim and see what's really going on beneath the headlines. The White House has repeatedly pointed fingers at Canada, claiming it's the main source of fentanyl entering the US. But when you look at the actual data, a very different story emerges. From 2022 to 2024, just 0.1% of all fentanyl seized at US borders came from the Canadian side. That's a tiny fraction, almost a statistical blip compared to the overall flow. The overwhelming majority of fentanyl is trafficked through the southern border, not the north. The numbers are clear and the evidence is overwhelming. So, why blame Canada? The fentanyl narrative is less about facts and more about political theater, an easy soundbite for politicians looking to score points. It's a convenient scapegoat, allowing the administration to appear tough on crime and border security, all while pushing a protectionist agenda that plays well with certain voters. Meanwhile, Canada is left scrambling to debunk a conspiracy theory that's somehow become official US policy, despite all evidence to the contrary. Prime Minister Carney's government now walks a diplomatic tightrope, trying to correct the record and defend Canada's reputation, without provoking even more chaos or damaging relations further. The real crisis here isn't just about drugs, it's about a looming trade war, built on fiction rather than fact, that threatens jobs and economies on both sides of the border. Canada's challenge is to respond with facts and restraint, even as the White House doubles down on falsehoods and ramps up the rhetoric for political gain. The result? A geopolitical mess with Canada caught in the crossfire of American domestic politics, and the truth left struggling to be heard. Enter the digital services tax subplot, a lesson in the futility of compromise, and a stark reminder of how global power dynamics can override even the best-laid plans. Canada planned a 3% tax on tech giants like Google and Amazon, hoping to raise $2 billion a year, an ambitious move to ensure that digital behemoths paid their fair share for operating in the country. But the US administration, led by Donald Trump, threatened to walk away from crucial trade talks if Canada moved forward, making it clear that economic muscle would be flexed. In a bid to de-escalate, Canada blinked, scrapping the tax, sacrificing not just revenue, but also its leverage at the negotiating table, hoping to avoid a larger conflict. The hope was that goodwill would be met with compromise, that a gesture of restraint would open the door to fairer treatment and mutual respect. The reality, however, was far harsher. The US pocketed the win and hiked tariffs anyway, showing little interest in reciprocating Canada's concession. Canada learned the hard way: concessions aren't rewarded, they're exploited, especially when the stakes are high and the other side senses weakness. The message from Washington was unmistakable: this isn't negotiation, it's a shakedown, and only one side gets to call the shots. Canada's attempt at appeasement only emboldened the White House, reinforcing the idea that pressure yields results. The digital tax debacle exposed the new rules of engagement: give an inch, lose a mile, and watch your bargaining power evaporate. For Canada, it was a painful but clarifying moment, forcing policymakers to rethink their approach to international negotiations. The old playbook no longer works, and the cost of learning that lesson was steep. After the digital tax debacle, Canada realized it was time to diversify. Carney's government began pivoting toward the UK and EU, seeking stable, like-minded partners. The message: Canada is open for business, no drama, just trade. Public diplomacy followed, with Carney and UK PM Keir Starmer projecting calm partnership. Canada's global ad campaign: tired of chaos, trade with us. Rewiring decades of US dependence is a monumental task, but now it's a necessity. The US is no longer a reliable anchor. Diversification is economic self-preservation. Canada is laying the groundwork for a future beyond America's shadow. The quiet revolution has begun. Remember the USMCA, the North American trade deal meant to replace NAFTA? It's now on life support. Trump's tariffs and disputes have shredded the trust that underpinned the agreement. The US treats the deal as optional, imposing barriers at will. The USMCA's first mandatory review is set for 2026, but the odds of extension look grim. Experts doubt the deal will survive. The foundation of trust is gone. Collapse would unravel decades of integration and throw supply chains into chaos. For Canada, it's a devastating prospect. But sticking with a broken deal may be worse. The USMCA, once a symbol of stability, now teeters on the edge. The White House seems intent on pushing it over. North American trade faces an uncertain, turbulent future. Here's a twist. In 2024, both campaigns courted 700,000 eligible U.S. voters living in Canada, many with ties to swing states. Their votes could tip the balance in places like Michigan and Wisconsin. Trump's campaign worked hard to win them over. Then, after victory, he launched a trade war against the very country where his supporters live. The irony is rich. Those who helped secure the win now face economic fallout. The feedback loop is brutal. Tariffs hurt everyone in Canada, including American expats. Political actions have real consequences, crossing borders and party lines. The next election may see these voters reconsider their choices. Actions, it turns out, speak louder than campaign promises. So, where does this leave us? The US is waging a tariff war on a debunked pretext, the USMCA is crumbling, and Canada is quietly playing the long game. Instead of retaliating, Canada is methodically building new alliances and insulating itself from future shocks. The pivot to Europe is more than reaction, it's a strategic reinvention. Canada's message: in a world of uncertainty, we're the stable, reliable partner. This is geopolitical jujitsu, using America's aggression to propel itself forward. By refusing to escalate, Canada is quietly outmaneuvering the White House. The result: a stronger, more independent Canada, less reliant on US whims. The unintended consequence? America's push has helped Canada find a new place on the world stage. In the end, Canada's quiet defiance may prove more effective than any tariff. Checkmate, eh?